rule of law programs. That's the focus tonight. And again, rule of law is a way of saying that you're ruled not by a president or a king or a monarch or an oligarchy. You're ruled by the law. The law rules all. We need to ensure the rule of law. We're a nation of laws. So the law is king. So that means whoever controls the law actually rules all. And because of that, rule of law programs exist to rule the rule of law and establish blob control over every aspect of society, from the constitutionality of legislative laws to the constitutionality of executive branch decisions and policy changes, to whether you can hire and fire people, to whether or not the president or prime minister of a country will be arrested on corruption charges, true or untrue, whether or not an election will be recognized. And so there is a race to control the court systems and control the judges and control the prosecutors. And I had been seeing this since about 2016 and had always told myself, I got to look more into that. I got to look more into that. I got to look more into that. But I didn't really substantially start to look into this issue until about 2021. Really started in like 2020 in a serious way. And then I began to see things. A lot of you guys don't know this, but I actually played a big role in popularizing what's now commonly known about Norm Eisen. If you guys remember the big revolver piece from 2020 that Tucker covered, I worked very closely with Darren on that, and that was a rule of law story. That was a story of Norm Eisen. I found the Democratic backsliding playbook that Norm Eisen published in Brookings, and that whole story. I'll say I played a indispensable role in telling that, and that rule. We've spent a lot of time on Norm Eisen, the Czech Republic stream that we did, the one last week. But that continued to spike my interest in these rule of law programs. That he had taken that special set of skills in lawfare in Eastern Europe and then come home to use them against Trump. But it really started in a big way with Brazil. I published this piece called U.S. Tax Dollars Funding Text Message Censorship in Brazil. I wrote this piece almost 2 years ago. And it was the story of how the programs and institutions and court systems and media companies and fact checkers and AI scan and ban technology to censor speech in Brazil, even on end-to-end encrypted chat apps like Telegram and WhatsApp, were being funded by the U.S. government, and in particular by USAID. By USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the Open Society Foundation, George Soros. And this opened a door to me, doing the work for this piece, because it begot so many questions. And one loomed above them. Because in doing the research for this piece, I found internal USAID documents that explicitly plotted to get the Brazilian government to pass censorship laws and to have the court, the censorship court, the Supreme Court and its sub-branch, the TSE, with the Lord Voldemort judge, to have the court pass censorship edicts. And I thought to myself, and I had already known a lot about USAID at that point, a lot. But this, I hadn't seen it formally laid out. And I thought, they can do that? They can have an internal campaign to get because you hear a lot about civil society strengthening, capacity building assets in the media, capacity building assets in the unions, capacity building, assets in the universities. This is stock and trade. We've been doing that the 1948 Italian election. We did that in Honduras and Guatemala. We did that in the CIA operations behind the Iron Curtain in the 20th century. We did that in the Arab Spring. We did that in the color revolutions of the aughts and the 2010s. But capacity building assets in the judiciary? That to me was shocking when I first saw it. Because the judiciary, by its very nature, is not allowed to be a capacity-built asset of somebody else. Do you understand what I'm saying? Media can be partisan. Unions can be partisan. Universities should not be partisan. They're 501c3s. But everyone knows, they are, and they're sort of allowed to be. You can have a Liberty University that sort of leans conservative. You can have what Ron DeSantis is trying to do with the new College of Florida, trying to sort of make it more of a conservative university. As long as it doesn't go too far overboard, you're allowed to be partisan as a university effectively. Doesn't mean that you should qualify for government funds if that's not what the people voted for, but everyone sort of understands. That's kind of the free market of ideas being expressed through the institutions. But judges, you can capacity build judges. Judges are supposed to be impartial, totally impartial. Justice is supposed to be blind. The very portrait of Lady Justice, a sword in one hand, a scale in the other, and a blindfold on. Our Lady, Lady Justice. The scales that she weighs things. The sword recognizes that she has the power to kill. The judges, the courts are the only entity that are authorized to kill you. The police can't just kill you. The military can't just kill you. Another person can't just kill you, because that would be illegal, and they themselves would be punished by the courts. But the courts are the only ones who are authorized to kill you, because it's a rule of law. But the whole linchpin is that justice is supposed to be blind. That's why we trust her with the sword, because she is blind. So that set me down a path of saying, how the fuck is USAID authorized to do this? Which quickly led me to judicial reform. USAID's role in transforming judiciaries, a global agenda. Oh, it's so funny. All this stuff is now, the search engines are now loaded with everything that's happened in the past couple. So let's see. Well, that's a funny quote here. I'm sorry, one sec. That's funny. Sorry, I just saw something really, really interesting. USAID evaluation fundings. Regarding judicial reform, the exclusive focus on judges seems misplaced. The exclusive focus on judges for judicial reform. The exclusive focus on judges. This is the Government Accountability Office. It's just a random thing I pulled up. I'm looking for a particular article to show you an example of what I mean here. This judicial reform capacity, it turns out, it's basically in USAID's charter. This is from the New York Times. This is from the New York Times, December 2014. This is right after the Zunzaneo scandal broke, and everyone thought, holy shit, USAID built a CIA Twitter in Cuba. They said the funds were earmarked for humanitarian relief in Pakistan, but they ran through Cayman Islands banks and engaged two subcontractors to set up a CIA Twitter in Cuba, try to fool the Cuban government to say that it was by the Cubans for the Cubans when it was sponsored by USAID, in order to activate an Arab Spring in Cuba, a Cuban Spring, and create smart mobs to radicalize people to take to the streets. And so the New York Times riffed on the disaster of this program. Secret programs hurt foreign aid efforts. There's a world of difference between American foreign assistance programs that openly support democratic development, human rights, and social progress, and the type of clandestine operations aimed at regime change that USAID has been running under the guise of democracy promotion programs. This is December 2014 in the New York Times. In the 21st century, USAID has overcome its tainted legacy and undertaken humanitarian. Now, this is really interesting, actually, they say. USAID was created in 1961 to help the U.S. win the hearts and minds of citizens. So, getting them to like us by bribing them, giving them money. Through civic action, economic aid, and humanitarian assistance. As a Cold War policy tool, the agency was at times used as a front for CIA operations and operatives. This is the New York Times, conceding that USAID is a longtime CIA front. For example, USAID did police training programs that doubled as torture programs. Great. And then, of course, you got to love the glaze, the New York Times glaze. They can't help themselves. In the 21st century, USAID has overcome its tainted legacy and undertaken humanitarian, political, and economic work around the globe. Yeah. You know, the CIA's whole creation was for organized political warfare, political subversion. So telling me that USAID, why are you lumping in the word political with humanitarian? Isn't that sort of the opposite? If you know, I give $20 to, you know, some little kid selling Girl Scout cookies, I consider that humanitarian. I don't necessarily need the cookies. I just want to reward young people for enterprising field work. If I give them the $20 and I tell them, the little kids, you need to vote for this candidate, and you should join my political movement. Yeah, that's no longer humanitarian work, genius. That's just called political operations under cloak of humanitarian work, which is the same shit they did as a CIA front. You dig? It runs democracy promotion efforts, USAID, from Afghanistan to Kenya, building political leadership capacity. What the fuck? We're back at this, New York Times. How can you glaze this? This is not humanitarian work. And do you think USAID would build the leadership capacity, again, capacity building, for a movement they didn't want to succeed? No, that would be against U.S. interests, against U.S. national interests. And so we only build it one way, so that the country can be a vassal for blob control, because its political leadership has been co-opted by bribery funds from USAID. The hell is wrong with you, New York Times? Electoral education and registration programs, again, only in the demographics who are going to vote the way that we want them to. and judicial reform projects with little controversy. Well, folks, I'm happy to report to you that I do believe that this phrase, judicial reform projects with little controversy, is the problem right now. That people don't even know these judicial reform projects are happening outside of a very, very, very small network of insiders. And I hope to change this last little clause. Let's make this bright as the sun. That way, it's as well known as things like CISA at DHS became well known, as USAID became known, which means we need to wrap our hands around this. Now I want to take you back to Brazil for a second. We're going back to Brasilia. So I started looking into judicial reform and rule of law programs in Brazil, and the sheer extent of it shocked me, totally shocked me. And I'm not an easy person to shock. Now let me pull up something real quick, some of these screenshots that I pulled. You guys may remember, I played this on the Joe Rogan show, and I'm going to play it again now. You guys have probably seen this clip more times than you would like, but I'm going to do it anyway to punish you. Okay, now I can turn some music on while I look for this. One sec. So how could I dance with another? Whoa, I saw her standing there. It's this one. Okay, so I played this on the Joe Rogan show, and I talked about this SEPS program at USAID. The Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening. Political process strengthening. How would you like it if China came in and ran a political process strengthening program here in the U.S.? We'd say, fuck that noise. You don't get control over our political processes. But USAID can do it using the weight of the American muscle machine to effectively control foreign countries' political processes. It was under this banner, imagine my shock, Paul Joseph Watson, I say, when I found that the political process strengthening program at USAID involved internet censorship work. We are going to strengthen Brazil's political processes by getting them to pass censorship laws and getting their courts to pass censorship edicts. So I'm just going to play this, and then I'm going to pause it at the appropriate stops here. It's a 2-minute, 20-second video. Now again, right off the rip, wait, can you guys hear this? Yeah. Right off the rip, you'll see it says, Countering Disinfo, a guide to promoting information integrity. Now understand, information integrity just means censorship. That is all it means, all it ever means, zero exceptions. Information integrity is a way of saying there's two categories of information. There's high integrity information, which is good information to amplify, and low information integrity news sources, low information integrity social media narratives, low information integrity social media accounts. And those are the ones that should be censored. So information integrity just means censoring everyone we designate low integrity. It just means censoring whoever we don't like. Okay? And you'll see it's USAID, SEPS.
Disinformation has invaded online conversations on social media platforms, posing challenges to healthy information environments and threats to democracy.
Because it's a democracy promotion program, they have to say it's a threat to democracy. That's their predicate that they lay down as a foundation to then step on your neck, step on your head. You can't shoot me. I have rights. You're a threat to democracy. That removes your rights.
It bolsters authoritarians, weakens democratic voices, and
Okay, again, there's the autocracy-democracy dichotomy. Authoritarian is anyone we don't like. Trump's an authoritarian. Marine Le Pen's an authoritarian. Bolsonaro's an authoritarian. But they have to use this framing because the whole legal syndicate, the whole institutional network is based on this. So they have to say it. I mean, they might as well just say bad guys, good guys. Democratic voice is anyone who's on USAID payroll or in the USAID partner network. Authoritarians is anyone that USAID wants to regime change. So ignore the word authoritarian. It just means enemy of the blob.
participation exploits and exacerbates existing social cleavages and silences opposition. Countering disinformation and promoting information.
No, you silence opposition. Disinformation literally doesn't silence anyone, even if it is disinformation. That's just like an opinion, man. So let's keep going here.
Information and promoting information integrity are necessary priorities for
We're no longer censoring speech. We're promoting information integrity. Our priorities.
necessary priorities for ensuring democracy can thrive.
So they're saying if you want to qualify as a functional democracy, the new standard, the old standard was you have to have a court system. You have to have checks and balances, like not a king. You needed to have a parliament to check the power of the president, and you need to have a court system to provide rights of redress and answer to a constitution. But they're saying now, if you want to qualify as a democracy, you have to add censorship, state censorship to what you do. And notice, the good guys' democracy is a clenched fist, which is, as we saw in the Otpour documentary, has been the clenched fist. That BLM fist is the same fist that was used for CIA work in Otpour and in Egypt and in Tunisia during the Arab Spring. They all have that. Democracy is a clenched fist about to punch you in the face.
The CEP's Countering Disinformation Guide is a resource including 9 thematic
sections. Now, I want to blow this up for you a little bit. I have the document downloaded, but we're just going to do it quick and dirty here. I don't know if you guys can see this on screen. Maybe I should pull up the PDF. But it says building civil society capacity. So that means the government paying censorship organizations and censorship universities and censorship legal advocates, okay? Capacity building is number one. Developing norms and standards means creating predicates to justify the censorship. Helping political parties protect the integrity of political information. So controlling what political parties can say. And then there's two I want to draw your attention to. One of them is called legal and regulatory responses to disinformation. So this is USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, their co-partner here, explicitly plotting to get laws in place around the world to do judicial reform and rule of law programs to get foreign courts and foreign Congresses, parliaments, legislatures to pass censorship laws. Point blank, period. The same thing we saw with judicial reform projects. What I saw in 2022 when I was digging deep on this topic is, holy shit, they're doing judicial reform projects to install internet censorship laws. And not just internet censorship laws, but internet censorship courts. You'll see here it says, and we're going to get back to this in a big way momentarily as I go through this story. But you'll see it says election management body approaches to countering disinformation. Election management bodies, EMBs. We need to put that in the back of your head and then forget about it for a second, because we're going to get it. This is in the heart of what we're going to be going over over the next 3 hours here. Okay. election management bodies, just before you set it and forget it, these are the judges and courts in any country that decide elections, that adjudicate contested election results. Remember Bush v. Gore, the hanging chads in 2000? That was adjudicated by our EMB, our election management body, the Supreme Court of the United States. In Brazil, the EMB Brazil has a Supreme Court like we do. It's called the STF, and they have a subsection of the Supreme Court, which is a smaller number of judges who are also on the STF, but are only on this thing called the TSE. The TSE is the EMB for Brazil, the election management body for Brazil. This is how Alejandro de Moraes has the censorship powers that he has, by running it out of the election management body. That's how he can go after every political supporter of Bolsonaro in Brazil. By saying that their political discourse impacts elections, you can't criticize Lula in Brazil. You can't call him corrupt. You can't compare him to Maduro or say he has relationships with Maduro in Venezuela. You can't talk about scandals about him because the EMB, the court, has decided that jeopardizes the political process of the election. This is how they went after half the entire country through that court. I'm going to make a quick note to show you something. This has begun to come home. Arizona, remember we went over ASU? Arizona Supreme Court Disinformation Task Force. azcourts.gov. This is the Arizona court. Task Force on Countering Disinformation within the Arizona courts. And you know who was running that for the Arizona courts? One of the guys from the ASU Center on Narrative, Strategic Narrative. You guys remember Center on Narrative, Narrative and Strategic Influence at Arizona State University that I talked about on the first Joe Rogan hit, and then they purged the website. We did 9 hours worth of streams on the ASU, the Arizona State University censorship cell. 9 hours we did on that whole network. Well, one of the guys from that network who was running that Arizona State University censorship center was running the task force on countering disinformation for the Supreme Court of Arizona, the state Supreme Court. The EMB, the same court that decides election results and that decides issues of election fraud and access to the ballots, is the same one that has a censorship task force set up, just as USAID. Now I'm actually going to add these links. Just as USAID had set up 3 years previously in Brazil. Where do you think they got the idea? So with that in mind, I want to now show you something. Oh, wait, I forgot to finish the video. Let's finish the video.
Sections and a comprehensive database of interventions highlighting various approaches for advancing information integrity and strengthening societal resilience to disinformation and other harmful online campaigns. The International Foundation for Electoral Systems, International Republican Institute, and National Democratic Institute developed this guide with support from USAID through the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening.
So it was IRI and NDI. Those are the Republican and Democrat branches of the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA front. Okay? So this is the CIA working with USAID to install censorship laws and censorship courts in every country on God's green earth. Let's keep going.
Here are 9 key takeaways from the guide. Addressing disinformation requires a whole-of-society approach.
Ring the bell. They said whole of society. Wow, we need everybody. Every institution in your society has to be a censorship institution. Thank you, CIA.
We need to create a sense of urgency to drive collective action for...
We need to drive a sense of urgency. Create a sense of urgency to drive collective action from every institution in society to promote censorship. You know, if you need to create the sense of urgency to drive that collective action, that means the people don't want it. And you are going to pull operations to get people to want it. By funding the media to create a panic about it, by onboarding the advertisers to change the economics of the news industry and change the economics of social media to make it happen. Boycott campaigns, threats from your allies in government. If you have to say this sentence, you are already on the wrong side of democracy, you fucking democracy promoters.
Addressing disinformation. Institutions and platforms have the resources to address disinformation, but lack credibility, whereas civil society has the credibility, but is chronically under-resourced.
So give them the money. Give our pawns the money, and it will look like it's authentic. It won't look like an astroturfed campaign coming from the CIA and USAID. It will look like look at everyone's just spontaneously interested in this.
Countering disinformation requires a mixed methods approach, including fact-checking, monitoring, and other interventions.
They say other interventions. Intervention is censor speak for censorship technique. Okay? Banning an account is a type of intervention. Censoring keywords is a type of intervention. Shadow banning is a type of intervention. Ghost banning is a type of intervention. Creating vast topographical network maps of trending narratives and then having them all algorithmically deboosted is a type of intervention. Demonetization is a type of intervention, okay? They make it sound like you are saving you from yourself by killing you digitally.
Focusing on major events like election outcomes alone will not achieve a healthy information environment.
I know we're the Center for Elections and Political Process Strengthening, but fuck all that. We can't just limit ourselves to elections. We can't just stay within our charter. We wouldn't be able to pull off this operation if we did. We need to censor everything year round.
Developing norms and standards, legal and regulatory frameworks, and better social media content moderation is necessary for a healthy information ecosystem.
Fuck that and fuck you. This right here, when I saw this, when this video first got posted, I went completely apeshit, and I still need to keep it in my pants every time I see this. The fucking chutzpah. Now, maybe you need to speak censor speak fluently to be able to understand the sheer magnitude of fuckery that's contained within this paragraph. Developing norms and standards means creating a predicate, a legal predicate to do something you're not allowed to do. For example, the FBI and DHS are barred by the First Amendment from interfering in the freedom of the press. They can't tell you what to print or not print. They can't threaten you for doing it. But if there's a national security concern, because Russian influence is behind something, well, they can take under the norms and standards for counterintelligence. It's best practice, don't you know, to limit the spread of Russian disinformation. It's a hostile foreign actor. It's a hostile foreign nation state. They're undermining the integrity of our elections. The norms and standards are effectively like social laws and little mini laws that justify something you're not otherwise allowed to do. Okay? When you're doing a false flag operation, you lay down a predicate that you can then use as a pretext to going to war. For example, the Operation Northwoods memo in 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff memo we went over many times. It's called Pretext to War with Cuba. We can't just go to war with Cuba right now, but what if we hijack our own airplanes and say they did it? What if we sink our own naval ships and say they did it? What if we do riots on the streets of Miami and say that the Cubans did it? That lays down a predicate that allows us to invade Cuba out of self-defense. Otherwise, it would be a violation of international law, and it would completely make us a pariah state on the world stage for us just to launch a totally unjustified, no national security justification. This is the same thing with Pearl Harbor. The 8 action plan, the McCollum memo plan that we went over from 1941, 42. Or was it 1940? We went over this. The 8 action plan, you can look this up, the famous McCollum memo, laid out, said that we want to go to war with Japan, but we can't be seen taking the first strike, so we should do 8 steps, 8 actions, to induce Japan to attack us. That way, when we invade Japan and kill them, it looks like self-defense. Okay? This is called how to get away with murder. If I want to get away with murder, I can't just walk into your house and kill you. That would be murder. But what if I invite you over to my house and then say that you attacked me by planting a gun on you, for example? Now I can kill you, and it's self-defense. Now I've gotten away with murder. That's what developing norms and standards is, okay? It is getting away with murder by creating a predicate, a norm, a standard that didn't exist before, but now we've created it. Now we've developed it through the U.S. Agency for International Development. And then the next line here is legal and regulatory frameworks for better social media censorship, content moderation, censorship. Legal and regulatory frameworks for social media censorship. Now you are point blank period flat out banned by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution from doing this here in the United States. And we have a formal program at USAID to implement the thing banned by the First Amendment in 120 foreign countries. And not only that, to do some of them to boomerang back on the U.S. itself by getting around the First Amendment by having an EU governing body populated by USAID-funded NGOs put restrictions on what Americans can say to Americans through the EU Digital Services Act, through what's happening with Brazil and things like that. Like you can't get access to thousands of Brazilian accounts because they're banned under law. So when I saw this, I went, holy fucking fuck. This is a worldwide, global rule of law program being run out of USAID to control the courts, the prosecutors, the judges, and the legislatures in 120 countries that SEPS operates in. I have to know more about it. And so I learned more about it. Let me show you a few screenshots here. Let me go to the SEPS Countering Disinfo Guide. Now, this is going to look small on screen. My apologies. You'll see the thematic topics, legal and regulatory responses. And you'll see what I've highlighted here is create a foundation whereby an EMB begins to build a network of actors that can work together to combat election disinformation. So USAID has a capacity building program to work directly with the highest court in a foreign country that determines elections and get that court to build a network of actors a network of people and institutions working with USAID that form a giant censorship web that runs out of the court, engaging with civil society organizations, universities. They get the religious organizations involved, the youth groups involved, to establish their declaration of principles. That becomes the norm and standard. That then gets codified into law, and then boom, you have censorship laws. They even strategize about ways to help bolster the credibility of the election management body, the court, the highest court. Coordination meetings between the civil society organizations, the fact checkers, and the courts. And here you see it says, in August 2019, Brazil's TSE court launched its Combating Disinformation program, which emphasized media literacy, a concept we've been over a million times. That just means censorship. Media literacy means if you don't read the right media sources, if you read anything that challenges blob media, you are media illiterate and need to get your mind right, and should not be able to access, cite, or discuss anything from a low information integrity news source. So to be media literate, you need to be clockwork oranged and only read blob propaganda. And secured more than 40 institutional partners, including media outlets, fact-checking agencies, and tech company representatives, okay? Yeah, that'll make the Brazilian Supreme Court impartial. Surround them with a network of dozens of media companies that are all pulling for the State Department's preferred candidate, Lula, and fact-checking agencies who are on the payroll of USAID and the State Department who are all pulling for Lula. Highlight. In 2019, Brazil's TSE launched its Combating Disinformation program focused on the November 2020 elections. The program brought together approximately 60 organizations, including fact-checking organizations, political parties. Gee, which political parties do you think it brought together? And research institutions. We're back to the CIA front researchers. The program organized efforts around 6 themes. TSE internal organization, again, that's the Brazilian Supreme Court, the Moraes Court. That's the one that he heads, Lord Voldemort in Brazil. That's literally his court. Training and capacity building, giving them money and telling them what to censor, training them what to censor. Containment of disinformation, identification and fact-checking of disinformation. This is a USAID program, guys. A formal USAID program. They put this in fucking writing. You know why? Because they had to scale this. Because it's not technically being run out of the CIA. So it's public-facing, which means not everybody involved is given a national security clearance and has to keep it covert. So they need to popularize it, which means they need to put it in writing. And then here, revision of the legal and regulatory framework. In 2019, USAID, this is 3 years before the Bolsonaro-Lula election. Bolsonaro had just won in 2018. That's when he became president. 2 weeks after that, USAID and NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, descended on Brazil to set up all this institutional architecture. It's a story for another time. But this is during Trump, midway through Trump's presidency. USAID descends on Brazil to get them to revise their legal and regulatory framework to censor pro-Bolsonaro speech. You know who one of the first partners in that consortium was? The Atlantic Council, with 7 CIA directors on its board, and annual funding from the Pentagon, the State Department, USAID, and NED. The Atlantic Council. The 60 organizations who are part of the Combating Disinformation program run out of the fucking Brazil censorship court. The Atlantic Council. Okay? More of these SEP stocks here. Their strategy, USAID, is to co-opt the civil society groups in every country, the election management bodies that we just talked about, and getting them to censor the internet through proactive, reactive, and collaborative strategies. Proactively censoring the internet, reactively censoring trending narratives as they pop up, and working with USAID and those shadow networks every step of the way. And getting governments, foreign governments, to pass laws and regulations to censor what you can and can't say. Then also putting pressure on the technology companies, and of course creating a media surround sound so that this looks organic. You'll see here, CEPS's core partner, IFES, partnered with Brazil's TSE court, its election management body, Alejandro de Moraes, to convene a 2-day exchange event preserving information integrity. Preserving information integrity. Pummeling free speech. Promoting internet censorship. With 28 participants from 9 electoral management bodies, including 12 from the TSE, from 5 continents. This is USAID getting 9 different countries' highest courts together and pummeling them with propaganda, with training, and with collaboration to get them to censor the internet. Do you appreciate the implications of what I'm telling you right now? USAID, and today it will be the USAID in exile. Those networks will now go informal. Just in this one event alone, got 9 different countries' highest courts in the room, cornered them, and effectively compelled them to put internet censorship laws on the books for the laws and regulations that they need to subject their people to. It gets better. Again, this is all from the USAID guide, which is publicly available online this whole time. From USAID's partner group, IFES, Global Social Media and Disinformation Specialist. Yeah, suck my ass. Digital disinformation is a real and immediate threat for election management bodies around the world. However, not everyone's censoring their internet enough. Some courts have sophisticated social media monitoring capabilities to track and respond to disinformation. Others do not have any social media presence at all. Again, these are compelling judges to determine what you can and can't say out of your mouth. The global gag order imposed by USAID. Others do not have a social media presence at all. For all of them, disinformation is an unwieldy threat. Now look at this. An EMB's resistance, a court's resistance to taking up a role in censoring the internet, may be based on an assumption that any response would require it to push them beyond their legal capacity. Let me cut through the bullshit again. A court or a judge's resistance to taking up a role in censoring the internet may be based on an assumption that any response, that any act of censoring the internet would push them beyond their legal capacity. The problem is a lot of the judges and courts that we work with think that it's illegal for them to do what we're asking them to do. So what does USAID do in response? They say there are a range of responses that courts can take that build on existing core functions of public relations, communication, and voter education. finding an alternative way to frame a court's censorship efforts, such as calling it crisis and strategic communication capacity, may be a way to gain institutional support for new initiatives. This is USAID telling foreign judges and foreign courts to censor the internet and getting feedback that a lot of them don't want to do it or don't think they can do it because it's illegal for the courts to silence the tonsils and the larynx and the vocal cords of hundreds of millions of their own citizens through a single rogue court decision, telling USAID, hey, that's not legal for us to do that. And USAID saying, well, if that's your problem, don't call it countering disinformation. Call it strategic communication. You got a public affairs function. You got a press secretary. You have someone who makes public announcements to the public. Fold it under that. Lie to them. I promise I'll believe. Call it Stratcom. You guys remember NATO Stratcom? COE, all the Stratcom stuff that we've talked about, how all the censorship stuff is folded under that phrase Stratcom? Why, they'd be censoring you if they stopped you from being able to do your own communications. So fold your censorship function under a communications, under a strategic communications branch. Nobody has to know. Isn't that insane? It's not just USAID coercing and funding and bribing, creating an influence network to influence judges, to get them to pass laws and regulations to censor the internet. But then, when they get pushback, strategizing how to overcome the resistance of the independent judiciary. When the independent judiciary says, it's illegal, let me propose ways for you to get away with murder. Reframe it. Play the frame game. Lie to them. Lie to them. They are not just training them, the judges and the courts, to censor. They're training them to lie to their own populations about them doing the censoring. Our influence node run out of USAID doing this. Okay, with that said, now we get to the research portion of this. And there's so much to go over here. And I want to give a very special shout out to Spiral Bewilder. Spiral, homie, I don't know if you are with us here tonight as we speak. It is after midnight. After midnight. But Spiral Bewilder, he's at Spiral Bewilder on X, has been sending me some really great source documents that I've not had a chance to look over beyond in a cursory way. And one more bit of table setting before we dive into the research and go into uncharted territory. But the UN, same as USAID, global principles for information integrity. And in this, they go after the advertisers, controlling the money flows to the news companies. 60 times in this document, they mention the word advertisers. This is the same USAID strategy. Global principles for information integrity, setting the norms and standards to be codified into law by the judges. So USAID is working all sides of it. They're funding the NGOs to put together the global principles. And then they're funding the rule of law programs for the courts to codify those global principles into new laws and regulations. You'll notice this is literally exactly what USAID talks about in what I just showed you. You'll see right here in this one, from the SEPS document, talking about techniques to install censorship laws by first getting this big network of NGOs, civil society organizations, universities, religious groups in a country, youth groups in a country, to establish their declaration of principles. That way, the court has credibility, the credibility of the court. When they pass censorship laws, it's not them making a rogue decision. They're just codifying what was first set forth in a popular, hundreds of signatories of fine, upstanding universities and civil society organizations and religious groups, and everyone wants this. So we're not rogue, we're just doing what society is already asking us as the law. First, establish a declaration of principles, norms, and standards. Then, codify it into law. That's literally this document. Global principles. They didn't even change a single letter. They didn't change a syllable. They didn't change a word. Global principles. Establish the global principles so that you can have these new censorship laws. And I'm focusing on censorship here, but remember, we are up against an epidemic of rogue judges and rogue courts where all these judges seem to have a wife or a daughter or a husband who's on USAID payroll, stopping virtually every significant action of the Trump administration, challenging it in court. Even the EMBs are penetrated. Our EMB, our election management body, the Supreme Court of the United States. Its Chief Justice is John Roberts, the close friend of Norm Eisen. And the state EMBs, like Arizona State University, they now have these disinformation task forces. Okay? There's the censorship laws side of this, which is what got me on this path. But I sense there is something much, much bigger here. A large story to tell of how the rule of law programs are structured, the technical details, the history and evolution, and I want to understand more about these programs. All right, so I want to focus now, diving in. I want to go through these source documents, but before I do, let's talk about our star players for the evening. I have a little bit of familiarity with this group. The American Bar Association. The American Bar Association, this is incredible. The American Bar Association holds $75 million in active spending awards under a single grant alone. Not all of it comes from USAID. They also get it from the DNC branch of the CIA, the NDI, the DNC branch of NED, the CIA spinoff. So the Democrats in the CIA are literally bribing the American Bar Association. Fuck. That is fucking sinister. Holy shit. Oh my God. They gave it over $1 million? In what year was this? That's one of their active grants? They're bribing. They're bribing the American Bar Association. The American Bar Association said it would make a blistering statement about DOJ dismantling their slush fund known as USAID. The ABA has received so many taxpayer-funded grants from USAID and the State Department, I can't even list them all, is what Lindsay says. The American Bar Association livid at the dismantling of USAID. Look at these grants. $10 million from USAID. $4 million from USAID. $4 million from USAID. $5 million from USAID. $22 million from USAID and $17 million from the State Department. The American Bar Association has gotten $40 million in just these grants alone. It's the American Bar Association. Founded in 1878. They set the academic standards for law schools. They run the ethics codes for the legal profession to get you disbarred, whether you can practice law. 200,000 dues-paying members, 200,000 attorneys in the United States. And they're the state bar associations. The New York State Bar Association, California State Bar Association. The ABA developed norms and standards around social media usage. The ABA's new take on lawyers' use of social media. Basically, they basically had like a hate speech law sort of thing. But I remember thinking, holy shit, You can get your law license pulled if you support Trump online. And of course, the things like the 65 Project were an active project to disbar the 65 lawyers who represented Donald Trump. And they disbarred Rudy Giuliani through the New York State Bar Association. They disbarred, did John Eastman get disbarred? State Bar Court hearing judge recommends John Eastman recommends he be disbarred. So you can't even be a lawyer. Now, one of the things that I have in my research tab is, where did they get the idea for the 65 Project? Was the American Bar Association working to disbar enemies of the State Department, enemies of U.S. aid in Eastern Europe? Did they work with the bar? Did the American Bar Association get U.S. aid payments to build capacity in the bar associations in Ukraine, to get any lawyers representing political figures or presidents they want to take down, get them disbarred so that they don't have legal representation, so that the judges have an easier time ruling, issuing a default judgment? I want to know, was there like a 65 Project in Yugoslavia? Did they try to disbar the lawyers there, the ABA? I want to know what exactly the American Bar Association was doing with tens of millions of dollars of U.S. aid payments to influence what are supposed to be impartial judges in courts around the world. And as we know, the Chief Justice of the United States, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, traveled to the Czech Republic to live in the house of Norm Eisen, so that he and Norm Eisen, between 2011 and 2014, twice he did this, could work together on European and American rule of law issues. Well, John Roberts was Chief Justice. He was made Chief Justice in 2005. Resources and support for lawyers, networking opportunities, legal publications. It advocates for legal reform, reforming the laws. It's a platform for lawyers and judges, because this is going to get really good in a second here. But this is from the American Bar Association Journal. In 2006, 20 years ago, by Robert Stein, Executive Director's Report. This is the Executive Director of the American Bar Association, the head of it. The American Bar Association is a leader in advancing rule of law around the world, controlling legal systems around the world. Its international development efforts. The American Bar Association is a leader in controlling court systems around the world. Its international development efforts have grown exponentially since the early 1990s, when the political transition in Eastern Europe created significant opportunities for changing their laws. I'm cutting through the bullshit speak, and I'm just saying this. Today, the American Bar Association's presence is felt worldwide. International Rule of Law Symposium brought together 400 distinguished leaders to stimulate dialogue about controlling these laws in foreign countries. The call for the symposium came after the American Bar Association's Center for Rule of Law initiatives and its 4 core councils: the Central Eastern European and Eurasian Law Initiative. So Central and Eastern Europe, the exact focus of the Cold War, basically, the Iron Curtain countries, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Its speakers included U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, the State Department, and the American Bar Association. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, remember this is 2006, a decade before she would run for president, and Lindsey Graham, as well as the administrator of U.S. aid. This is in 2006, 20 years ago. They had the current head of the State Department, the then current head of U.S. aid, as well as Hillary Clinton and Lindsey Graham, as the keynote speakers for controlling the laws of every country on earth. Every country in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So I guess technically that leaves Antarctica. There may be a few fucking penguins in Antarctica that are not felt worldwide by the American Bar Association's legal control mechanism.